How's it going, everyone? And in today's video I'm going to be doing the last video in my alternative exercise series on the exercises you can do instead of your big three lifts. So we've already looked at the back squat, the bench press, and now today we are going to look at the deadlift. And I'm not going to lie, I've not even got a clue when this became an actual series, but it's a series now and we're finishing off with part 3. And as always, if you want to do your free bit of charity for this week, please make sure to subscribe to me on the channel if you're not already subscribed. It's absolutely free and helps me out massively, and also as well, if you can, like the video, especially if you find the video useful, and even if you don't find it useful, just like it anyway, because I don't really care. So again, it's not going to cost you anything other than just one little click off the button, and I will be eternally grateful for all your help. I'm pretty sure I've used that line before, but just do it again anyway. So today I'm going to be giving you the 3 alternative exercises you can do if for whatever reason you can't do a normal conventional deadlift. Say you've got back issues, a bit like I've got, or maybe hip issues, or any sort of mobility issues, just anything and everything that is restricting you from doing a normal conventional deadlift. It's maybe just an exercise that you just really struggle with. I'm going to be giving you alternatives you can do that's going to serve the same purpose. Now, as we said, I do think that conventional deadlifts are the best form of deadlifts, but these exercises I'm going to give you are going to be a suitable replacement. Sometimes they're going to be just as good, but even if they're not quite as effective, it's always better to do some sort of alternative rather than just nothing at all. So we're going to crack on with the list. Now, what I will say is that I could pretty much have this list just full of deadlift variations, because there is quite a lot you can do. So I wanted to at least start off with one movement that is not a deadlift, but it's still a hip hinge movement. And again, it just gives you a different option, because let's just say, for example, that your issues are stopping you from doing any sort of deadlift at all. So the first exercise I'm going to give you, number 3, is the hip thrust. Now, I know hip thrusts have been categorized and villainized as a Insta fit chick booty movement, but they actually are still a brilliant exercise. Again, maybe not quite as good as a deadlift, but this is at least still a hip hinge movement, which is what a deadlift is. That's an alternative to doing an actual deadlift. It's maybe quite hard to visualize this because you are in a totally different position, but a hip thrust is still a hip hinge, which is what a deadlift is, and that's where basically your hips are opening and then closing, or closing then opening, I should say. Because you're not bent over, it's taking a lot of the stress off your lower back, which is what stops a lot of people from deadlifting. And again, it just gives you that different variation of doing a hip thrust without having to do a deadlift. And then also, the reason that's also a pretty good thing to have is you can also put this in as well as deadlifts in your program. So maybe on one day you do your deadlifts, and then another day you do your squats as your lower body movement, but you also chuck hip thrusts in there that's going to allow you to still work on your hip hinging without actually doing any deadlifts. It's a pretty versatile movement. You can pile this on with load, and you can make this like a heavy strength movement, or you can rep out with it and make it like a hypertrophy bodybuilding movement. And it's actually a very good athletic movement as well to cross over for a sport. So you can either obviously train that as a strength movement, or you can take the weight right off and make it almost like a dynamic movement as well. Now we're going to move on to the actual alternative deadlifting movements, and there's 2 that stand out for me that if somebody came to me and said, I can't do normal deadlifts, what can I do? These would be my first 2 exercises that I would suggest that they go away and try. So the first one is an RDL, a Romanian deadlift. RDLs are an absolutely brilliant exercise and a great alternative to doing conventional deadlifts. Obviously, you can't use quite as much weight on them because you're throwing load a lot onto your hamstrings, and then also your glutes as well. I think there's a little bit of debate on how much your RDLs are actually going to target your glutes, but for all intents and purposes, it is like a hamstring exercise. Your back is still going to be doing a lot of work, but just not quite as much as you would if you were pulling from the ground. Apart from the actual muscles that are working, it does offer a lot of the same challenges that a conventional deadlift does, such as your grip strength, obviously if you're doing it without straps, maintaining your lower back position, and obviously working on your core strength, core stability, whatever word you want to put on it. And yeah, you can still use it as a heavy strength lift, although obviously again can't quite use as much weight as you could on a normal deadlift. You can also use it as an accessory exercise for strength training, so maybe not like your main focus on the session, but on the exercise you do later on in the session. And you can use it as a hypertrophy bodybuilding movement, and that is what a lot of sort of bodybuilders are using nowadays. That seems to be the fashion just now, where everybody's doing RDLs, and a lot of the reason behind that is they still want to do a hip hinging movement, but they just don't want to put quite as much risk on their lower back as a conventional deadlift does. So that's why you might see a lot of bodybuilding type of people doing RDLs. Now, I've not got much of an issue with that. Again, don't think it is as effective as a conventional deadlift, but a suitable alternative nonetheless. Now finally, what I think should be your first like protocol, your first go-to if for whatever reason you can't do a conventional deadlift, what I would always suggest to someone is go away and go and try sumo deadlifts. Now, are sumo and conventional deadlifts different in a lot of ways? Yes, they absolutely are. However, they do have the fundamental similarity and the fundamental principle of you're going to the ground and picking something up and standing straight up with it, and that is a deadlift movement. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you going away and doing a sumo deadlift if you can't do a conventional deadlift. You might even find that you're better at sumo deadlifts. Now, that's where this argument comes in that's probably never going to end, if I'm being honest, and that's people saying that, oh, sumos don't count, sumos cheating. You've not got as much range of motion, it's just a little short movement, and sumos are a lot easier than conventional deadlifts. Now, for some people, that is the case. For example, I've coached people where sumo deadlifts they find a lot easier, and that is the exercise, the deadlift exercise they can do the most weight with. Sometimes that is down to the shortened range of motion, but a lot of times it's just down to the levers and it suits them best. However, you do get people, and I'll use myself as an example, who I have done a 280 kilo conventional deadlift, but there's absolutely no chance at all I'm doing that weight sumo. It just doesn't suit me. I just feel like I get no drive from my glutes and my legs. I just find it just so much more difficult, and that is where the argument falls down, because obviously you do get a lot of these big deadlifters that do the big massive conventional deadlifts, but I would guarantee you, if like your Eddie Halls or half Thor Bjornsons or whatever sort of example guys you want to look at, if they could do more weight on a sumo deadlift, they would 100% be going away and doing a sumo deadlift. And it is an easy argument to make that you see somebody moving the bar a shorter range of motion, but that isn't always the only factor to consider when you're trying to decide if a lift's easier or not. And when it comes to sumo deadlifts, it's just one of these things where it might suit you, it might not, but regardless, I do think that if you can't do normal deadlifts, go away, try sumos. If you've got any injury issues, you might actually find that that position suits you and takes the pressure off those injured points. And I know I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but getting back to the core point, sumo deadlifts are absolutely a great exercise for you to do if you can't do deadlifts. And even if you can do conventional deadlifts, you might even find that you're better at sumos. So don't shy away from it, give it a try, it might work for you. If I could do more weight on sumo deadlifts than I would conventional, I would probably be doing sumo deadlifts. Maybe it doesn't look quite as cool, but at the end of the day, it's both pulling a bar from the ground, and that's a key thing you need to keep in mind. They are both deadlifts. Now, normally I would end the video by giving you a few exercises or variations of exercises to avoid that people often do in place of deadlifts, but truth be told, there is no real substitute for deadlifts. It's either you do deadlifts or you don't. Obviously, you get different forms of deadlifts, like a few of them I've touched on this list here, but again, you just don't really get an exercise that is mimic deadlifts. If people don't do deadlifts, or when people don't do deadlifts, it's because they just want to avoid doing them. It's not because they're trying to work the same muscles in a different movement. They maybe do different exercises to work the different muscles, but it's just not deadlifts. They are just, it's the reason they're the king of the exercises in the gym. So if you do fall into the category of avoiding deadlifts for whatever reason, then hopefully you're not thinking this, but just bear in mind that you're never going to replicate them unless you go and do a deadlift. Obviously, I've gave you the hip thrust as a little option, but again, they're just not deadlifts. So that's the video. Hopefully you found this useful. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Helps me out massively. If you do need some help with deadlifts, it's probably my specialty as far as exercises go. I will leave my coaching inquiry form linked in the description below. You can have a little look at that, and if you're interested, you can fill that out. I'll get back in touch with you, or even if you feel free to drop me a message on any of my social media platforms and I can get back to you. That's pretty much everything, and I will see you in the next video.